Thanks everybody for taking the time. And thank you to those who may be with us live right now in the moment or watching this after the fact. My name is Josiah Gilliam. I work in Mayor Peduto's office as the MDK coordinator, and it's my great privilege and pleasure to have a great conversation with some really cool team members, both within the mayor's office and in other departments. We wanted to take some time to talk about the implications for the parts of city government and the mayor's office that serve young people and youth. And there's a lot to explore here. There's a lot of intersections. We have some of the best team members and best educators on these very subjects here with us today. Just by way of framing, the My Brother's Keeper position at the city of Pittsburgh is actually interestingly aligned compared to the way this work happens in other parts of the nation. The way the mayor really envisioned it, along with other leaders, is for the role to be a blend of the mayor's office and city parks. That's because the work of city parks is in many ways public-facing, and we're going to get a chance to learn about some of that today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the members of the team that we have with us today, starting with Lindsay Powell.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks for, can you talk about your role at the mayor's office? And we'll go through everyone's role and then I'll come back to you for some framing questions.
Sounds good. My name is Lindsay Powell, as Josiah said. I serve as the Assistant Chief of Staff to the Mayor. Largely, I work in the legislative and policy world on issues varying from out-of-school time and youth to economic development. However, I can support the office and the administration.
Thank you, Lindsay. Ms. Tiffany?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tiffany Semino, and I'm the Youth and Education Manager. I work on lots of initiatives around youth, early childhood, out-of-school time programming, as well as the Dolly Parton Imagination Library.
Thank you. Ms. Katherine?
Hi, everyone. My name is Katherine Vargas. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Recreation in the Department of Parks and Recreation. And I get to focus all of my energy on our youth-facing and community-facing work and facilities.
Thank you very much. And Max?
Hey, hi, everyone. My name is Max Tennyson. I'm the Digital Inclusion Coordinator. And my job is really to engage many of our youth that frequent our rec centers into tech and tech-adjacent experiences and exposure.
Thank you so much. So let's just jump right in. Again, thank you all for taking your time. And also we have two ASL interpreters with us today that you'll see at different times. We want to thank them for their time and being with us for this conversation. Lindsay, I'd like to start with you. Can you talk about the Office of Equity and some of the intersections at play with the conversation we're going to have today?
Absolutely. So the Office of Equity was founded about a year ago at this point, maybe a year and a half, with the idea of really focusing on people. So when we're talking about equity, we're not thinking so much from a neighborhood perspective, but more so how can we pour into our community, into our residents to ensure that we're making a more equitable future for Pittsburgh. The Office of Equity covers a myriad of different topics and subjects, including out of school time, which Tiffany covers, as well as small business and entrepreneurship. We work with the welcoming community, so those who are immigrants, migrants, refugees, newcomers to Pittsburgh. Our critical communities, which includes our homelessness, or people who are experiencing homelessness, veterans, as well as we work very closely with the EORC, which is our Equal Review Commission. So ensuring that small businesses have the opportunity to contract with the city. The really purpose and vision of the Office of Equity, again, is to ensure that we're thinking about equity in all of its intersections. So not just racial equity, not just gender equity, who I did forget to mention, Anu, who runs our Gender Equity Commission, is also seated in the Office of Equity. But again, looking at equity from its kind of intersectional standpoints and ensuring that we're making sure that all of our residents are upheld and their visions are upheld within our understanding of what equity means for the city.
You mentioned this idea of what equity means, and it's certainly a term that's gotten raised a lot in a lot of conversations we've had here in the city, whether that's in the foundation world or nonprofit scene, universities, et cetera. And we've seen businesses as well start to adopt this focus, maybe through hiring practices and stuff like that. One of the first things that really got underway when after I joined the mayor's office, it had already been in the works, and through the Office of Equity, has been a partnership with GARE. And this is a way for us to think about decision-making more systematized throughout city government. Could you touch on what that partnership has looked like and why they're valuable to us in this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think oftentimes when people think about equity, they think about hiring. So, making sure that there's diversity within your ranks, making sure that there's representation at every level of leadership. But we're trying to think more intentionally about what equity means. It's, for us, what we do. Are we thinking about from how we pave streets to how we fund programs? Are we ensuring that we have a racial equity lens on our projects and programs? GARE, which is the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, has partnered with the city and partnered with the Office of Equity in particular to help us really go through department by department, ensuring that our programs, policies, and procedures are all using a racial equity lens, and that we're really centering that voice within the work that we do.
Thank you so much. So let's just start to get through some of the buckets that you've mentioned. Tiffany, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. You've been at the mayor's office for some time. For the people that don't know you and your work, could you just describe a little bit of your background? Actually, let's just take a pause real fast. First of all, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm getting used to working from home and meeting with all of the groups I'm part of remotely. So it's been a challenge, but I think I'm getting into it. I'm getting into the flow.
We've been in so many work meetings, and I knew you from my time with the nonprofit land. My mind immediately goes to work, and let's start talking about the things. So thank you for taking a moment to share how you're doing. If you wouldn't mind, would you mind just sharing your background and how you came to the mayor's office and the work that you do there?
Sure thing. So my background is in early childhood. So different than a lot of other folks who maybe work in the office who have more of a public policy background. I have a more direct background working directly with children and families. I've been a preschool teacher, I've been a child care center director, run a summer camp program, and the mayor has a very strong commitment to early childhood and wanted to bring someone on board. And that was in support of city council members, a women's caucus of city council members who wanted to push forward an early childhood agenda. So I joined the team specifically focusing on early childhood, which is still the majority of my work, but I do also do some other work around summer youth employment, out of school time programming, and just making sure that our work with youth is also part of our work in the office.
Thank you. So you mentioned the early childhood space and this idea of some of the kinds of entities that are involved. These could be schools, child care facilities, et cetera. Can you just describe the general landscape for us as it relates to how COVID-19 has impacted folks in our city?
Sure thing. So early childhood is an interesting landscape in that we have home-based childcare providers. We have independent childcare facilities that may be small businesses or nonprofits. And then we also have a ton of programming that happens within the Pittsburgh public schools, as well as another community partner called CoTrack. And the challenge around COVID, and when the governor closed businesses, childcare facilities were a part of that. And so the only childcare facilities that have been able to operate thus far have had to either get a waiver if they're childcare facilities, or home-based facilities have been able to remain open the entire time because they do serve a small number of children. And so I am part of a group of folks that are working to support those childcare facilities that remain open, which has been interesting. So it's been interesting to learn from childcare facilities some of the changes that they've had to make in their programs in terms of wearing masks, more hand hygiene, cleaning toys, all of those sorts of things. It's very challenging to support social distancing with infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. And so I think it's something that, as Allegheny County moves to the yellow phase and childcare facilities are able to reopen without a waiver, it's been a learning experience to be able to hear from those providers who are currently providing care and to see what we can do to support childcare facilities in reopening, because we know as the economy reopens, families are going to need childcare and somewhere safe for their kids to be while they're working.
So thank you. So this is certainly, there's a bunch of equity lenses that I hear as you're describing it. Where does your mind go around this topic of equity, and particularly when you get down to even that micro level of individual child care providers? What are your thoughts there?
Sure. So so many folks that work in child care facilities are women and are women of color. And so it is an industry of women. And so to be able to make sure that we are able to support those facilities in reopening, to be able to get folks back to work is extremely important. We know that early childhood high quality early childhood programming is able to really impact children for their whole lives. And so kids that don't have that access don't enter kindergarten kind of ready social, emotionally, and academically to be successful. So we know this is going to be a challenge moving forward. We want to make sure that we're able to get kids back into programming as soon as possible so that they're able to get early intervention services, they're able to get those social, emotional supports, and that they are able to get those skills that will help them throughout their lives.
Appreciate that. You also have you mentioned Learn and Earn, which is summer employment program. Could you just describe that in broad strokes for folks that might not be interested? And then I'm very interested in what the current realities look like with COVID this summer.
Sure thing. Summer Learn and Earn is our summer youth employment program that's open to children or youth 14 to 21 that reside in the city as well as Allegheny County. And it's a summer youth employment program that places them in workplaces. They work about 25 hours a week. They get job readiness skills. They get actual skills working and being able to bring home a paycheck. And so over the summer, they make a little over $1,000. I am a part of Be a Middle School Mentor, and I have an 8th grader that I've been mentoring for a few years, and she did the program last year, and she absolutely loved it and talked about it all year, all of the fun things she got to do and the money she got to make and what she bought with the money. And, so it's a really exciting program for youth to be able to get skills. And the reality with COVID is we know it's going to be very different this year. And so Partner for Work is the organization, our local workforce investment board that actually handles the day-to-day and contracting of Learn and Earn. And they're working really hard to kind of revision what it'll look like this summer. It's still going to be open. We're encouraging families to apply. The application is open right now, and we can put that in the link in the chat box so that folks can pass that around. But we're looking to get as many youth as possible employed. They will be doing, it's going to look different. So we're looking at more of an online component. So youth will log on at specific times during the day, do some job readiness training. Maybe we'll have them engage with different companies and businesses to look at, maybe someone's website to see how it speaks to youth. So there's going to be some work around that. And then there's also going to be some positions that will be able to still happen with social distancing. So maybe trail building, organic gardening, more things that are outside.
Okay, that's exciting. So if folks want to get involved or learn more, they can go to the Learn website. We'll put a link, and we have our team members on standby looking at the chat to make sure resources are available for folks in real time. And then certainly after, we'll make them available. But the applications are open now.
They are open right now. Yeah. And so and a big challenge is a lot of youth get kind of recruited into the program through in-person, through community events and school visits. And so with COVID and all of the closures, they are down a little bit in terms of the applications. So they're really looking to figure out ways to engage youth now and to get more of those applications in. So we are able to place youth in positions this summer.
Great. So you mentioned engaging youth now. We've been working with folks in public safety and now the mayor as well on a really cool, at least I think it's cool, reading initiative. And the mayor in particular is using the Dolly Parton library collection. Can you talk a little bit about that partnership, how it came about, and what it is?
Sure thing. Yeah. So the Dolly Parton Imagination Library Program has been in existence for about 20 years. We joined on as an affiliate last year. So actually last June was our first mailing month. And it's been extremely successful. So what we do as an affiliate is we enroll families, do the outreach, and we actually pay for the children to use the program. So it's totally free. Any child that resides within the city of Pittsburgh, they have to have a mailing address within the city, and is under the age of 5 is eligible. And they receive a book mailed directly to their home every month until they turn 5. And the books are really great. I have a little example book. So this is a very popular one.
Yeah.
But they are wonderful books. They come addressed to the child. And so it comes in the child's name, and there's a lot of excitement. We've heard from families just how excited kids are to get their books every month. And we've sent out, and next month will be a year we've been in existence. We've sent out a little over 27,000 books to children in the city, and we have about 2,800 children that are currently enrolled in the program. And so we are always looking for more kids to sign up. It's very easy. The application process takes about maybe 2 minutes. You just need the child's name, parent's name, address, date of birth, that sort of thing. It's very quick and easy to register. And you get your first book within the 2 months. Your first book comes in 2 months, and then you get a book every month until your child turns 5.
That's so great. Over 27,000, you said.
Yeah, we're so excited. So we're looking at ways to outreach. So we're exploring putting some signage in bus shelters and new ways to get the word out. We do a lot also similar to Learner. We do a lot of in-person community fairs, things like that happen over the summer. So we're definitely looking at new ways to engage families with those large gatherings being canceled.
Thank you so much. All right, let's keep with the theme of programming and youth engagement. Bring in Katherine Vargas. Katherine, you're someone that I met when I was working in nonprofit land here in Pittsburgh, and we've been friends since. Now we work together in many ways on the same team here at the city. For those that don't know you, could you introduce yourself and the role that you have? But before you do that, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you, Josiah, for asking. I'm doing well, all things considered. I feel very grateful that I'm good. So it's been an interesting shift in work life, but it's been good.
Okay, cool. So yeah, could you just take some time to talk about your background and your role in city parks?
Sure. So my background is in social work. I got my master's in social work at Pitt. And I've since then been mostly focused on youth programs. I've worked in out-of-school time programs, ran out-of-school time programs, helped to grow partnerships around those same youth-serving programs, and have done a lot of work around quality work and professional development for providers. So that's really where my heart is in those things that impact young people, and particularly the way community can come together and play a role in the lives of young people. I think it's a really important time. Kids spend a lot of time outside of school buildings and outside of different buildings, and so there's a whole community of organizations that are playing a really important role in supporting young people. And so I came to the city. What really attracted me to the work I get to do now is that I'm still part of that community by being, part of city parks and what we do with our recreation centers and the programming that we're able to facilitate through our department.
Thanks. So we'll get to some of the buckets of ongoing activity at the city. We have a really unique segment. You mentioned this idea of the community and all the organizations that work in partnership, and you've been involved with partnerships and networks and folks like that. Can you just describe the folks that might not be as familiar with, say, the out of school time or nonprofit space in Pittsburgh, what the landscape looks like here in Pittsburgh? When you say you're still part of that community, what is that community?
So that community, it's a lot of different types of organizations. It's faith-based groups that might be running out-of-school time programs or summer programs. It's larger organizations, like a Boys and Girls Club that would run out-of-school time programs. It's everything from community-based to large national nonprofits. It's a pretty wide variety of faces that you would see in terms of who actually facilitates programming. And it's for all ages. Out-of-school time programs are typically that school-aged period, but, you've got programs that are very specific to certain types of work, something like robotics or STEM, or there might be programs specifically about girls in STEM, like the YWCA facilitates. So it's a pretty wide network. And, if you're really you can connect to a lot of variety of types of programs by exploring, what's out there with Pittsburgh's youth serving community. It's a big community of providers that are playing this role.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's talk about the city. So you've made the transition to the public sector here and are still working with community partners and those organizations, but there are entities within city government that have programming. Can you talk a little bit about what your role covers and what you're focused on day to day?
Sure, yeah. So on our community youth side, well, first I'll mention that the City Parks Department focuses both on youth and children and older adults. Right. So we facilitate programming in places that bring those communities together specifically. We have 10 recreation centers where we do after-school summer programs. We have an aquatics department. We run youth sports leagues. We have the art cart and a lot of festivals that happen here around community enrichment. We have a summer foods program and a school year food program that's focused on young people. So we facilitate a lot of programming at the city specific to making sure that young people have access to those opportunities.
That makes sense. So City Parks is Parks and Recreation for the city of Pittsburgh. That's for those that may not know, that's like our way of saying it. When you're thinking about what happens in these spaces that literally hold community and have programming within them, what are important terms or concepts that you try to keep in mind with the work that you do?
So I would say one we've already talked about a little bit, but out of school time learning and what that can mean. In our spaces, we have both kind of traditional after school, where someone might sign up and be part of a program, but we also have informal, learning happening all the time. Our rec centers have gym equipment. They have programming that's offered to community members, even beyond young people. And so I think it's really important that when we think about out of school time, we're thinking about a pretty broad definition of what that means. And then also partnership. We are always looking at how we can partner with others to enhance what we're doing. And what we find in a lot of our recreation spaces are the partners who come in and use those spaces as well for community meetings or for different gatherings. Those spaces are there for the community to utilize in that way as well. And then I'll also say, maybe a summer food program, because it's such a huge lift of what the city does. I think that it actually goes a little unnoticed most summers. Just last summer, we handed out 120,000 meals to young people across the city in partnership with 40 organizations, including our sites. We were at 80 sites across the city to make sure that young people have access to nutrition in the summertime. It's a huge role, huge important part of what we do. And so our summer foods program, what comes with that is a state run program that has federal dollars attached to it. So it's there's a lot of entities to make that happen.
Thank you for mentioning that, because that's part of these COVID realities has been, a pivot to how can we do these food distributions on an ongoing basis. And you've been one of the folks at the tip of the spear. I've had the good opportunity to join you for a couple of them so far. I hope there are more in my future. Can you speak about the COVID realities and how that pivot has taken place and what that's looked like?
Definitely. Even before we were on a stay-at-home order, we were already working with Lindsay and others to talk about how we can make sure we were part of the solution when it came to emergency food need. The summer food program doesn't usually start until closer to the end of June. So we needed to actually apply for an emergency waiver. And what we did is we looked at sort of the landscape of where food we knew, where we knew food was going to be delivered and accessible. And we looked at the sites that we could facilitate where there were gaps in that, so that we were complementing the overall landscape of food distribution that's happening for kids in the city. So we are currently at 5 sites. The site that I get to work at is Parton Recreation Center, which is in the Lincoln-Leamington community, and it's been wonderful. I mean, at our site, we typically have about 100 meals that we'll give out for every day that we're out there. You really get to start to kind of know the consistent faces of people who really are relying on this access to food for kids. It's a stress reliever for parents. It's an important way that kids are accessing nutrition. And what we've also noticed is that, we've had the community come out and be a part of what we're doing at the food site. So we've had donations of school supplies from like Education Partnership. We had the Pittsburgh Police come out, so we have masks for anybody who comes to the site. And we've been also helping to distribute information about really critical issues in the city out to the community, like Learn and Earn, like Tiffany mentioned, the Imagination Library, the census, talking to people about doing that. So it's really become quite a hub of a way for us to really make sure we're getting resources out to community members. And we're doing that across all 5 sites. I should also mention we partner with the Salvation Army to have a presence in Homewood and the West End. And then we're also at Arlington and Warrington Rec Center, both on the south side.
It's a great idea, a great concept or example of how local government and just the city of Pittsburgh can be nimble even in a crisis. You're talking about getting an idea of the landscape of food distribution, looking at where there are gaps, looking at what facilities are in play to activate them for this purpose. But then it's not just about making the connections with food, to your point. It's also about how can you engage with them otherwise. And there might be, say, information about critical issues like the census or learn and earn, et cetera. But there's also this idea of like just getting to know people in this season, the consistency of the faces that you see. I remember the last time I was with you, a leader of a local consortium was there just talking with us about the history of Lincoln Leamington, the history of the community and the organizations that have been there for decades, and was doing their own food drive as well to try to be extra resources for neighbors. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful season in that respect. As you look forward, because we're not exactly sure at this moment in time when the rec centers can feasibly be open for normal operations. What are you thinking about the new normal and how to continuously improve, iterate, and engage?
Yeah, well, so we've been planning for all possibilities because, as we've been looking at how we plan for summer and beyond, our number one goal is to be able to facilitate as much as we can for kids and families while also keeping them safe as possible, which right now, it's a balance. So we've been having those conversations. We've been planning for multiple, possibilities there. But we've also been thinking about how we can make sure that regardless of what we're able to do, that we're able to reach as many families as possible. So we've been looking at both virtual opportunities and pop-up opportunities or ways that we can have activities and enrichment on sites like our food distribution site. One thing that we know for sure is that our food distribution will expand from where we are currently to our centers as the state rolls out its summer program. That's one place of opportunity where we know we were going to be able to continue to reach kids and families and be able to serve. So we're looking at those as opportunities, and we're also looking at partnerships with others. We've had a couple of partners reach out around ways that we can get really creative about how we can best serve kids in this time when we're not 100% sure, what we'll be able to open. But we've been planning for all of it. Again, our goal really is to be able to do as much as possible to make sure that kids have as normal a summer in Pittsburgh as possible, while also making sure we're keeping people safe and following the guidelines that, are coming from the CDC and from our governor.
Makes sense. Extraordinary work done by the department in conversation with the mayor's office, of course. A good moment to acknowledge Director Chapman, someone that's well beloved by myself and the others on this call.
And myself.
Really great work there from the organization, or from the department, I should say. Max, I'd like to turn to you, man, because when we talk about programming and engaging with youth, you've been at the tip of the spear here at the city. Since we both joined, we're both relatively new here at city government. But I'd like to get a little bit more from your background and how you've engaged with youth. But before we get there, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Just adjusting like everyone else to the COVID situation, getting used to Zoom calls continually during the day. But to be healthy and be able to even be on a Zoom call and to be able to continue to work is really the important thing, right? Just staying safe, keeping your mind busy, and continuing to work is the blessing. So I'm doing well.
Yes, sir. Well, we're grateful to have you on the call. Would you mind sharing with the people that are viewing a little bit about your background and how you came to work at the city?
Yeah, so my background is largely in education, but if you wanted to just kind of synthesize my career, I've always been interested since my university days in crushing the education gap. And the quickest way to crush poverty, or if we're going to address equity or anything like that, it was always to crush education. Like if we can, the education gap to me is what causes poverty. So if we can address that in the quickest way, then we can start to create sustainable living for young people. So I've always, since a very young man, been interested in how do we address the education gap so that we can get people in good jobs and sustainable living. And that has led me through education in Pittsburgh Public Schools, also working with kids and youth programming. But ultimately, I always tell people my aha moment was when I was introduced to tech, because I had seen so many people who had no education, no cultural background of computers, literally take a trajectory of sustainability and a year and a half. And for me, it was like, this is it. So when I would go back to my community and I would work with the kids, I would, everything I ever read or I come across, I would go back to the kids and say, hey, do you know about artificial intelligence? Do you know about coding? Do you know about machine learning? And when the answers was no, I just felt like it was something that needed to be addressed. So that's much been my mantra for the last 5 years. Let's address tech is the future. We know that all of the jobs in the future in some way will be surrounded by tech, which ultimately brings kids or individuals back to some type of programming, coding. So I wanted to address the education gap in that way. If we could get kids into tech, then we could get them into sustainable jobs, $50,000, $60,000 jobs, $80,000 jobs, and then they can come back into their community, and we can have, it just addresses everything across the map. So yeah, that pretty much brought me to the city. There's so many more resources, so many more children. We house, I think, over 600 kids. We have 10 recreation centers. And when the opportunity presented itself, I was all for it. My goal was still the same, to get as many young inner city children, women, into programming. For people who may not know, that may be watching, less than 7% of the tech industry is women or people of color, minorities, Black and brown. So when we talk about diversity, when we talk about equity, these are things that need to be addressed. So the more exposure, the more experience that these young kids get, the more CS degrees we could get them into, the more that the playing field becomes even, and people have opportunities for true equity. Yeah.
Thank you, Max. I appreciate that. Tech is certainly an extraordinarily important component of our lives and a growing one. But you know this, sir, there's a lot of conversation around tech and around things like the digital divide or access to opportunity. And yet when I met you when I was at the Home of Children's Village through our friend Fred Brown. But not too long ago, you and I met at Big Dog Coffee in the South Side just to talk about work before you joined the city. And you were at the time working with a group of kids in Carrick, I believe. Can you talk about what the approach is to take it from this theoretical conversation of tech and these terms to working with individual youth? You've touched on some of it already, which is you bring it back to them and ask them what they're interested in, what they're aware of. But can you talk about how your approach with individual youth has taken shape at the city?
Yeah, so I pretty much, my approach has always been deductive and thinking about the kids first. So like when I sit down with children, I want to know what they're interested in, what they want to do, what they want to make. And many times, they're using technology and not understanding what they're using. For instance, when we do courses, we were able to do a few cohorts this year at Polson, Warrington. But the first thing I start the children off with is I ask them, when you're texting somebody and those 3 boxes come up, right? After you text, you don't even understand it, but it's actually an algorithm in there. And when you say a word so many times, the computer can almost guess what you're going to say next. So if you say, I love you, Mom, every day, by that 5th day, when you type love is in one of those 3 boxes at the bottom. And I explain to them, this is an algorithm, but this is AI. The computer is actually able to guess what you're going to say to your mother or your friends or whoever you're texting. And we can create something similar to this. We can create, how can you make this better? How could you make this? And it's so interesting when you work with the kids to hear the answers, because they do. Specifically, I remember one kid telling me, I can make a better iPhone than Steve Jobs. Those type of answers are what excite me, because I think kids are interested in technology. It's just the ability to be exposed to it, the ability to work with it in a way that matters to them. So we're dealing with kids with athletics. Can we build an application around you playing sports? Can we build an application around, music videos? Hip hop is a very important thing to a lot of our kids, or music in general. Building applications and websites around what they are actually interested to can be a great segue into them actually being competent in the larger tech world. Because no matter what color, where you live, everybody's playing Call of Duty. Everybody's playing a video game or using some type of video game system. When you're that young, so much is similar, but what's not usually similar is the ability to exposure to high level. Some kids have a Mac computer in their home that they can easily access, and some people have no computer. So those are the things, when we talk about equity that we, in the digital divide, that we really need to address, is just to make sure that kids have a somewhat fair chance at accessing the same type of technology, the same type of opportunity, so that they can think about making similar or the same type of decisions.
I love the example of the predictive tag. I think an iPhone that I'm familiar with, that's at least how I know it, where you can choose from boxes likely next things to cut down on it. And I love that example because you're bringing it to their everyday experience, something that they're interested in. And sometimes we'll have conversations, Max, you've been in so many of these, and the adults, the smart people, and the well-resourced, they want to talk about the curriculum that they've already developed, or the experience they've already figured out for the kids. And it's about how do we get the kids in this. And what I hear your approach is you're bringing it to what they understand, and you're not yourself being predictive. You're just asking them what they notice about their world, and then following the interests as they organically appear. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a framework, but within the framework, we want the kids to kind of dictate what they're interested in, and then go from there. Because when it comes to applications or apps or websites, you can build literally whatever you want. You could build stores, cash registers. It's interesting to see. We dealt with a group of kids in Phillips. There was a young lady who was very business minded, and she was interested in, how could I charge for candy? And we can help her build a calculator to determine that. So you never know what's going to come out of a young person's mouth. I mean, literally, it can be anything from, one guy said he wanted to upload all of his music, and he could do a better like a media player for himself than what he was used to. Those are the cool things that I like to address with them. I don't like to tell them what to do. I like to kind of hear what they want to do and kind of create around that.
Okay. I want to ask about the specific coding classes we've had at Paulson and Warrington. What are these young people doing? What computing or what languages are they learning, and how have they responded to that opportunity?
So at Paulson, the language. So let me start with the languages. So we did HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This was many of their first time having exposure. We did the classes on Saturdays. The cool thing about Paulson was it was a Saturday, right? So most kids want to go party and play or just go have fun. But these kids showed up every weekend. They were on time. Sometimes they were there before us, sitting outside playing, waiting to work hard. And again, we started, there's actually pictures on our rec site, but we work with their interests. One young lady was into poetry, so she was really heavily into playing with fonts and different, shaping her poems differently. And although it wasn't the project I specifically wanted her to work on, it was just cool to see her engaged. So it was like, there would be times where she would have both boxes open, kind of something that us as adults may do, like have your real work and what you really want to work on in two different tabs. But, just seeing her become interested in it, and by the end of the process, understanding the process of creating the application was really cool. And what I like to do is kind of slip the, put the medicine in the candy. So many of our lessons are around core principles, variables, functions, arrays, things that you have to learn to code, but we kind of slide those in along with the project. So we start off with a main kind of theme of what today is, and kind of build projects around those things. But it was cool. We made bunnies. We made there was a calculator game, battleship game, just a few different things that the kids would be interested in. But for it to be their first time to be exposed to coding, it was really a cool thing to see how engaged they were, how hungry they were to continue to learn. And many, even though it was a Saturday, would stay later and continue to work on their projects.
That's great to hear. So one last question, then I want to open it up to everybody. Max, when I think about buckets of city activity that are already relatively well positioned to pivot virtually, or to kind of exist in the post-COVID normal, yours comes to mind because you can engage with youth around these same kind of projects so long as the technology the infrastructure is in place to make that happen. And yet your work specifically is in very many ways at this digital divide, at this level of where are the resources to bring to bear so that folks have these opportunities. Maybe it is inviting folks to a rec center, but then what are also ways to ensure that there's technology present, for the young people and stuff like that. And Max, we've talked about this before. A lot of the jobs of the future, even the ones that haven't quite yet been designed yet, will likely require some of these very fundamentals that you're talking about, the understanding of the infrastructure and the architecture, whether that is coding or web design or whatever the case may be. When my question to you is, for business leaders or for leaders in general that are trying to figure out, what to do about these digital divide kind of concepts, given your relationship with actual young people and a track record of engaging them specifically, what does success really look like? How would you encourage them to go about being a part of the solution in that success?
Yeah, so I would say, just being interested and making connections on what I've come across is a lot of big companies, corporations, they seem to be interested in working with young people. They just don't have the on-ramps or the segues to be able to get involved. So, reaching out to somebody like the city or parks and saying, well, we could collaborate would be great. But also if you can't partner with us, there are plenty of community organizations, but they just really getting involved, because at the end of the day, the workforce will be these young people, and we're going to need people to work these coding, these computer programming jobs. And I think it was over 3,000 jobs unfilled last year in programming. So I always give people the statistic that if you took every graduate from every one of our universities, all the great universities that we do have, and you put them in positions of computer science in the city, we would still have about 12 to 1,500 jobs unfilled. So we still have a huge gap, and there's so much opportunity, and there's an ability, if we really apply ourselves, to use this young talent who's hungry. We can address so many issues by just engagement. So I would just say, be intentional about engagement. Reach out to someone like myself, anybody on this call, actually, Sister Powell, Katherine, Tiffany, and engage us, because youth programming can start as young as 3 years old. You can be doing concept-based coding. There's ways to engage kids. So I would just say, be intentional about that. And some organizations have. So kudos to those organizations. But ultimately, we're all going to get old, and somebody's going to have to fill these positions in these jobs. So the faster we can engage these youth, the better off the future is. And just quickly, I'll be brief. We've been, Katherine spoke about it a bit. We've been preparing for both ways as far as addressing the digital divide. So we have some things like we're creating packets for coding if you don't have access to a computer. And we're also trying to figure out how we can manage programming, because many kids are at home and don't have, they have their schoolwork, but after that, there's many hours with the way the pandemic is to work. So we're definitely planning for both ways and trying to address all issues. So stay tuned for that, because we definitely want to keep engaging. And not, I know this sounds weird, but there may be some advantage to COVID-19 being that everybody's at home, at least for computer people. There are going to be more kids at home probably than if we were in normal time and the weather's great. Kids are outside. They're not necessarily trying to sit down at a computer. So we want to take advantage of that. If there is a bright side to this, we want to definitely take advantage of that.
It's well said, Max. If there are opportunities, I think it makes a lot of sense to seek them out and be intentional about them, especially as it relates to engaging with young people, to your point. I want to bring the rest of the team in. Can we talk a little bit about the Digital Harbor partnership? Max, I know you've been very involved with this. Feel free to kick us off if it makes sense. But you mentioned this idea of partnerships, folks reaching out, and different people kind of playing a role. What is that all about, and how does it help inform what might be possible moving forward?
Yeah, so I can start it off. When I came in, we came in around the same time. Well, I was a little bit behind you, but around that same period of time, we had an opportunity to work with Digital Harbor out of Baltimore. They create teen tech spaces. At the time, Assistant Powell was very gracious, and she was actually controlling much of this. So she knows much of the beginning of the story. I came in middle to the end, but just working together, collaborating, speaking about what a teen tech hub would look like in one of our centers. We were able to access that grant, and we will be able to redevelop the Jefferson Center, which is in the north side, I think Brighton Heights area. So I don't want to talk about all of it. Assistant Powell, you want to jump in? And
yeah, absolutely. Being incredibly gracious. But essentially what we did was we had an opportunity to apply for funding from Digital Harbor. They are kind of one of the originators of changing recreation centers to tech spaces. So rec to tech, as we lovingly call it here in Pittsburgh. The city of Pittsburgh, as well as several other organizations, including Remake Learning, as well as Sean Luther's organization, Oakland Innovate Labs. We've been working together to kind of figure out exactly what the first iteration of rec to tech looks like. How can we really rethink of our rec centers as spaces for workforce development, for innovation, getting away from kind of the traditional basketballs and hot meals. We still do that, but we can add much more to those spaces. So Max and a team of us in the city, as well as community partners that I named, came together to think about a proposal. We beat out 20 cities and won a substantial grant to start to do that work. Our rec centers are beautiful facilities, but they are a little older than what we see in other cities. And so it's been a mix of a kind of facilities issue of trying to bring these buildings that were built in the 1960s, into 2020. But then also a programming issue of how are we, as Max said, thinking about using STEM and STEAM education within these spaces. So we started with Jefferson Rec in the north side. We're looking to expand both, again, the facilities aspect of it as well as the programming. And there's a lot to be done, but we're excited about the path forward.
It's a great idea. Katherine, anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I just I wanted to also mention, I came in at the very tail end of that project, but what I got to see is how, at the city we were able to leverage a large investment in facilities infrastructure improvements to Jefferson, which is a rec center that definitely benefited greatly from that. And then the money from Digital Harbor coming in to help us really, create the kind of tech space that Max and Lindsay described. That's part of the equity work that we're doing. One of the things that right when I jumped on as well, we started to look at the work that GARE does with others in the equity office. And one of the things that we decided as a department, we put together our GARE plan in partnership with the equity office team. And we really wanted to look at how we were making decisions about where to invest and what to invest in when we looked at our facilities and our programming, with an eye towards equity in every decision we're making. What we noticed is an opportunity to better leverage the data that we have about what we are able to do and how we're able to do it. So what's really great about Digital Harbor is I see it as a way of Jefferson becoming one of those sites where we can really start to see what happens when we leverage investments, we work with partners, and we're able to really create a significant resource for the community that helps to promote equity, particularly in the digital access space. So it's been a really cool project to be part of. I'm excited that moving forward we are looking at similar opportunities for other rec centers, and that it's a way that we hope that we're able to really maximize what Max gets to do as our digital equity coordinator.
Yeah, it truly is wonderful because again, so much of this conversation can remain esoteric. As if you think about like a panel at a conference, it could be high level, and you're talking about the history and the context, and that all has its place. The thing I love about being on the parks team and on the mayor's office team is that when you get down to the level of the city or say rec centers, it starts to be relatively manageable numbers. You're talking about 10 locations. And then there's this idea of, with MBK, this equity lens of taking a look at programming. One of the first things Max and I did together, we went to Jefferson Rec Center. And it's a small rec center. It was built a long time ago. There's a substantial investment to upgrade the facility when we were walking in there. But it's also a space where, whether it's the work that Tiffany does, Max, now Katherine, there's programming taking place. You got summer camp activity. You have Miss Pam knows like the kids specifically, like the names and their histories and years of working with them and getting to know them. And I went and talked with her. She's talking with me about team members, issues that they face, individual youth issues that they face. Max comes and we engage directly with the youth about what they're into. And I got to see it firsthand. It was one of the first times where I was so impressed with the reality of gaming for these young people. It was boys and girls so excited to raise their hand and talk to us about the games that they were playing, right? Now you're talking about this facilities infrastructure, the facilities is getting improved. Here's, from another sector, resources for the programming that's taking place in that rec center in direct response to the feedback being gained and by the supports and investment from different levels. It's a great idea, or a great example of how all these things not just intersect conceptually, but actually, right? And now you're talking about monies getting dispersed, specifically. Any response to that idea?
Yeah, I mean, that's right on. That's exactly kind of how the process works, and I think it also speaks to how we work internally as a city. It involves Department of Public Works, it involves innovation and performance, it involves the mayor's office, it involves city parks, and it's really how we are able to kind of all work together to actualize the concept that is Rec to Tech. And it's to Max's credit too, the fact that we have invested in having a digital equity coordinator in our department is really significant, and it really does keep us focused on that being a priority of our work moving forward.
Yeah, I would just add to that, one of the really cool things about being at the city is the ability to bounce ideas about what really works for community for me. Much of my work prior to coming to the city is you got to make decisions on your own. You rarely have colleagues that you can say, you think this is going to work. You kind of just try things, throw paint against the wall, hope it sticks. But since I've been at the city, you're able to have so many good, thriving conversations. So many people help myself with the Digital Harbor Grant. Of course, Chief Powell, Oliver Beasley, Katherine came and helped seal the deal, Director Chapman that you spoke about earlier. There were so many moving parts to that, and just getting people's opinion and how can we best address this, or how can we best utilize this money is one of the biggest things that's been a help for me since I've been at the city.
It's extraordinary. One of the things I remember that I've felt impressed to say to youth a couple times directly is this idea that's hard to communicate, quite frankly, but I try to encourage them that there are things aligning in your favor, and there are people that you might not be familiar with that are working hard so that the future unfolds in your benefit. And this is a great example, I think, of that, where the young people will continue to benefit infrastructurally, programmatically, in terms of access, perhaps even in terms of technology over time, because as they continue to show up, as they continue to be a part of the community there and engage with us. I'd like to bring this conversation to a close. I'd like for you all to just weigh in on what the future looks like. What are you thinking about as we go into the summer here? As crazy as it may seem, that we're barreling towards the summer so quickly. And then finally, what would you like people to pay attention to in terms of resources and upcoming opportunities?
I guess I'll start then. As far as post-COVID, we have a lot of collaborations. We are partnering with 25 Carrick. We're also partnering with the Jewish Healthcare Foundation. As far as on the groundwork, again, we're trying to pivot, making sure the kids still have some type of access to code or some type of computer programming access. So look for some type of cohorts online, as well as if you do not have a computer or access to Wi-Fi, there will be information packets in which you can at least go through them and get familiar with syntax and other coding things that we would talk about in general if we were able to have in-person classrooms. So just kind of stay tuned. We're doing our best. We're still going to make sure the kids that frequent our centers have some type of access to computer programming at some level.
Thank you, Max.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off of what Max said. We're planning to be very present this summer, regardless of what it is we're able to facilitate. So we're excited as a department. I'm excited, this being my first summer/fall time with the department, to get back at the work that we do as much as we can. But we're planning to be visible and out there no matter what. So, like Max said, our goal is going to be to be able to facilitate as much as we can, as quickly as we can. But we're also going to be, getting, pretty specific about how we can best activate the programs and centers that we operate with as much safety as possible. So we're looking at, what kind of changes in protocol do we need to think about, all of those important things to make sure that whatever we do, whenever we're ready and able to open back up, that we're ready to engage community in the best way possible. And I also want to do a quick shout out just to some of our program supervisors who have done an amazing job this summer to really make all of this planning happen. Our food program supervisor, Carly Getman, has done an amazing job of just trying to make sure we're staying in line with our food delivery. It's a complex process. Everything from that gets you to the meal being handed out is a lot of work. So she's been doing a wonderful job. And then also Dwayne Ashley and John Coyne, our rec supervisors, have been out there every day with me and others on the team delivering food to kids and making sure those sites are operational. And then of course our aquatics director, Shelley Terlecki, and our community enrichments program supervisor, Nancy Byrne, has also been doing a lot of work trying to make sure that we can have as great a summer as possible. So look for all of us out there. We're really trying to do our best to serve kids this summer and beyond.
Certainly, and definitely want to underscore the shout outs to the team. Hello to everybody. We love the work that you're doing. And City Parks actually has, I might be a little bit biased here, but I will acknowledge it, one of the best social media presences in the city. So if you want to go to Facebook and follow along, and Twitter, City Parks, to get updates as well, you'll get a lot of great information.
Thanks to Sue Lucas.
Thanks to Sue. We love Sue. All right, Tiffany?
Sure. So I think what I'm looking forward to figuring out is how we can support those childcare and out of school time facilities that are interested in reopening, helping them to identify funding opportunities for materials, because we know as children go back to care, there's going to be a lot of changes in terms of like health screenings and safety and PPE, and how do we work within the city to be able to support them, and how do we advocate for them on a state and federal level so that they have the financial supports and the resources that they need so that they can reopen and that families can return to work and children can continue to get that important enrichment and early intervention that they need, the social emotional contact with their caregivers and other youth, so that they, when we get back to normal, whatever that looks like in the future, that they're getting those supports.
Tiffany, you mentioned that this is an industry of women in so many respects. When you talk about childcare workers and women of color, and then there are specific connections perhaps to be made here when you talk about the PPE, whether it's through public safety and others. Any other places you would encourage people to take a look or to engage around what resources might be available?
Sure thing. I would direct folks to the Early Learning Resource Center, which is the Allegheny County resource for early learning. And so they have some directives around how to stay safe, the CDC guidelines. They're able to provide technical assistance. So I do direct those childcare facilities. I know that they are working with organizations like Global Links to identify materials that would be needed. So if they need disinfectant and some of the things that are harder to get right now. So that is the organization that I'm kind of directing folks to. And they also have a connection to the state. So they're able to, if there are questions around details that they need, they're able to get those answers to them quickly.
Thank you so much. And then lastly, could you talk a little bit about the Keystone Star rating system and any encouragements you would have for childcare providers once they start to reactivate in terms of taking advantage of that system to scaffold up to more resources and supports, et cetera?
Yeah, sure thing. So Keystone Stars is our state quality rating system for early childhood, and it's a 4-star system. And basically, it's a program that helps childcare providers improve their program, and there are some financial incentives. So once they move up in the Keystone Star system, if they serve children with childcare subsidy, they are able to get some additional funding from the state, as well as to be able to get some funding for their staff in the form of annual bonuses, things like that. And we will be launching in the near future a quality fund. And that fund will enable childcare facilities if they are, what happens is sometimes people get stuck at one level because there are some investments that need to be made in the program as well as in the facility to be able to meet quality standards. So we will have a $2 million quality fund that will be open to childcare facilities that operate within the city of Pittsburgh, small business as well as nonprofits. They'll be able to apply to that fund and be able to improve their program so they can move up in the STARS system.
Thank you so much. Just want to, emphasize for folks that there are resources and resources coming and ways to reach out and engage and have folks walk alongside you in your journey to serving folks better. It's a huge equity component for us, and I remember so many of those early for me when I first got involved, MBK conversations with you, Tiffany, were around those keystones. So it's a cool full circle moment for me to talk about that in 2020 during a global pandemic. It's kind of fun. All right, Lindsay, take us home here. What should folks be paying attention to? What else comes to mind for you?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you to everyone that's watching. Thank you to the team. We have a really dedicated staff that are invested in ensuring that our kids during the summer, during the school time, in the out of school time, have the best opportunities, that we're providing new experiences for them, that we're able to provide food and nourishment, that there's resources for young people and their families. And so to all of our city parks workers, to all of the city workers across departments that work in the out of school time and youth space, we want to say thank you. In order to follow the city, to make sure that you're getting as many new resources that we've talked about, new programs that we've talked about, please be sure to follow us on social media, as well as Twitter, Facebook, all of those good things. We're trying to get out the information as much as possible, especially to the families that utilize our centers during the summer. We're there, we're visible. We're trying to make sure that, again, our young people, our youngest Pittsburghers have as much as possible a normal summer. And so, again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for trusting us with your children, as well as ensuring that this team in particular is able to respond to the unique and critical needs that our young people face. So thanks for being on the call.
Thank you, Lindsay. For those watching, a couple final housekeeping items. The next in this ongoing series around COVID and equity will be on Friday, and we'll take a special focus on small businesses and the URA and supports in that arena and sphere. Very much looking forward to that. There's a lot of services and resources that have been recently made available, both in response to COVID, but also before that folks may not have had a chance to hear directly from the people working on it, what those are. So stay tuned for that. More information will be on the mayor's office social media related to the details there. Please continue to engage with us on social media, whether it's in the chat here, we'll try to be responsive, but just also in general. The team has pivoted tremendously to make sure, to Lindsay's point, that we're getting as much good information out there as it becomes available. We appreciate people bringing resources and opportunities to our awareness so that we can share them out, and the patients too, as we all try to navigate these new normals. But as you can tell, there's really smart, dedicated people working on this from diverse backgrounds and perspectives, and things are moving along. So that's it for us today. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Guys, bye.